Well, Ross Chapin, welcome to ANCO.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so thank you for hanging out with us a few extra hours on what is the tail end of a whirlwind trip. I thought we could just start by talking about your experience. This is your first time, I think, to Northern Kentucky, to Cincinnati. It's been a whirlwind tour. What have been some first impressions?
I feel a real pride of place here, a pride of this general location, a pride of community, facing daunting, challenging issues, some of them, but seeing opportunity, seeing possibility, a willingness to face into the issues and find solutions.
What have been some of the surprises?
Surprises. Well, we're working in a small town east of Lexington. It's a very small town, maybe a mile long, perhaps, 1,000 people. And it has had its better days. And since in recent years, it's lost just about everything. It's lost its main post office, its restaurants, its school, public school. It's lost things. Things have moved away, and yet what I see and feel is a pride of there's been something very special here that we've had, and we could have it again. And so they're looking forward, even in the challenge of what exists now. I think there's an optimism.
You know, in those conversations in that town, I was struck by the vocabulary and the sophistication by which the leaders, and in most cases, they were elderly women that were running this town. And the specificity and sophistication that they used to describe the memories, not only of I loved that house or I remember that street, but I remember Elaine and when she brought me this, or when I was new to town as a young mother, I was at an all-time low, I had no money, and this community embraced me. I was struck by how those stories started to describe what you have taught us about, which are patterns of sociability in a place. Walk us through what that is and how it relates, or what your observations of being here told you about the state of that here.
What we heard in Millersburg from the various different people is that the stories matter, the stories of the things. Memories are tied to place. And so when place is changing, there's anxiety because they don't want to lose their memories. And so memories are key. And so I think the challenge that we have, if we're going to be able to help them, is how do we have places that honor and link the threads of story, the threads of history, of community. But also looking forward, how do we create places that create new memories, that create relationships that have their ways in which they serve the strength of the community itself. When we take a look at our work, we are creating physical places. We're doing design and planning and development and building, but this is a backdrop to our lives and how we live. And I think when we take a look at the life of the place, we need, as designers, as people shaping the built environment, to look at what kind of ways that we can uphold and support the relationships in a community.
So when you think about place, and you think about places addressing challenges that communities are facing, what are some of, walk us through the pattern language or the pattern language methodology when you look at a place as a way of using patterns to solve issues or solve problems?
Well, let me start by saying a pattern language was first considered by Christopher Alexander as a way to describe the places that seem to have life and brightness in many people's minds. And he's identified various different characteristics of those places, and he's named them in terms of patterns. To discover the patterns of place of a town that works, I think it's important to ask first the questions of what are the issues, what are the concerns, what are the needs, what are the opportunities? And instead of coming in and overlaying an image, overlaying some idea of the, the well-educated folks trained in all these different places and bringing in our good ideas, rather that, first listen. What is it that works, that they love? What is it that they're challenged by? What are the issues? What are their concerns? And from that, to begin to discern a set of patterns, if you will, that resolve the challenges, the issues. And those are linked from larger scale to smaller scale, from the context to the middle scale, to the local clusters of nearby neighbors, to the home, to the garden scale. It all works within scale. And if we get the right patterns at the right scale down, then we've got good bones to the whole. Everything fits within a larger constellation. And when they're not considered, when you're not thinking about the whole, then each action is piecemeal. It's not connected. It doesn't reinforce. It doesn't connect. It's like a room full of people just chatting away, maybe sometimes to themselves. And the room is just a cacophony. Rather than coming together and there's a sense of wholeness of the place, a sense of there's a good fit to everything.
So in your career and making these observations and letting them kind of inform and shape your practice, you've arrived upon a typology, pocket neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Talk about what led to that uncovery, that discovery of that type, and what are the kit parts that kind of make up a typical pocket neighborhood?
Great. Well, the first pocket neighborhood I worked on happened because in our town there was zoning that was pretty much typical of everywhere in America. It has single-family detached homes fronted with garages and driveways. And the zoning and the kind of economics of development, it was pushing for larger homes that are all everything taken care of within its own boundary. And yet the street itself it was almost like a no man's land. And so we considered another approach that would, at the time, work for small households, 1- and 2-person households. And we came up with a zoning overlay that gave the permission to do twice the density of homes on a group of parcels if they're limited in size, there's a garden at the center, and parking is friendly. It's not in your face, either out on the street or to a neighbor. So we were able to develop, build, create 8 cottages, 700 square feet on the main level, and then another half level up. 8 cottages on 4 lots, about 2/3 of an acre. And when we did that, we created a sense of community. So I remember when we were bringing people, the buildings just got framed up. And we're bringing people off the street. It was a busy street. They come into the courtyard, and the voices all the time, if I'm in conversation, they would get quieter. And people would look around and go, my gosh, what is this? This is amazing. And I was expressing, well, it's kind of like a pocket of precious jewels. They're really special. And I described it at that point as a pocket neighborhood. And the term stuck. Mm-hmm. And later I realized that a pocket neighborhood are pockets of nearby neighbors. In small groups, being human, we're sociable. We can't help but chat. We just tell stories, go back and forth, talk about kids or grandkids or the ball game or whatever. It's what we do. Most of development in conventional planning is about houses and density and numbers and units. And in our lives, it's about story, it's about place, it's about having a safe place to be. And in a pocket neighborhood, it's designed around sociability in small groups. So one of the first patterns would be the scale of sociability. Instead of having groups of 40 or 50 or 100 units around maybe a big park, there might be 6 or 8 or 10 homes around some kind of shared space. So scale of sociability. The other one would be around a shared commons. So you've got between the public space and the private world, you expand that out into an intermediate zone, and that would be the shared commons. And between the shared commons and, say, the front door would be a zone of sociability. And that's the place where you've got your room-sized porch, you've got your place for a picnic table, you've got the places for the chats, the coming and going when you're in your daily life. And these are the impromptu conversations that come up. I mentioned room-sized porches, not just a key-fumbling porch of figuring out how to get in the house and get the key through there, but having a porch that serves as a room, which is part of the interior, but it's also part of the group of homes. So it really belongs to both. And it's the scale linking between the cluster of homes and the individual home. Now, the privacy is important. And so you've got the layers of personal space. Between the sidewalk and the front door, you've got 5 layers, as I see it. You might have a low hedge, a fence that opens to a front yard, that opens to the frame of the porch, the room-sized porch, and then the door. And so you've got 5 layers between there and the door. And if you then take the planning further, you've got a privacy, public to private gradient. So you've got your active areas of the home forward, your kitchen, your living room, your dining area, looking out onto the commons. And then farther back, more private, you've got the bedrooms, the den, the places where you want to retreat to. And then outside, you've got perhaps a little secluded garden. If you've got an upstairs, bedrooms, dens, playrooms. So you've got the public to private gradient. When you've got houses that are designed together in context, you can also reinforce privacy by having nested homes. So having a home, imagine to the front is the porch and opening out to the shared space. To the side would be windows. And in this climate, it might be you open out to the sun, maybe with a shade tree, big windows. On the north side, you've got high windows, or windows that might be translucent, or skylights to bring light in, but you're not opening from your window looking directly at the next one and them looking at you. You don't have that claustrophobia relationship with your next door neighbor. That's really key. So you can have more homes on less land, but feel larger and live larger. The property line might be 5 feet away, but there's an easement which allows the south-facing home to use the space fully all the way up to the next building line. And then the next door neighbor uses the same thing. So you've got fully usable side yards. So these are patterns that nest together from garden to house to the shared neighborhood to the wider neighborhood. Cars. We've got cars in our world. We're connected by cars. So what do you do with them? So you can tuck them into a lane on the backside and come in like a standard lane or an alley that you might see in a more an older type neighborhood. Or you might have remote parking where you walk from the parking area through the garden. So from the car door to the front door through the garden. And that creates more opportunities for sociability. We need to have cars. And in places where you've got ice and snow, they need to be closer. Maybe they need to be attached. But let's not have the car dominate our worlds. In the home world, it should be for people. Sure, cars, but let's welcome cars on our terms, not the car's terms. So those are a series of patterns of pocket neighborhoods that I think work really well as a little cluster.
One of the things you described on our travels this week that I thought was really powerful and an interesting way to talk about them is when we talk about pocket neighborhoods and patterns of sociability and togetherness, what carries the day, what the headline is about community and being social. It's kind of ingrained to who we are. But the details around figuring out privacy are kind of the workhorse underneath it all that we have to get right, and where the experience that you've obtained throughout your career has been really about figuring out how to get those layers correct and figuring out the private realm just as much as it is figuring about the magic of how we come together. So much of this goes beyond what's measurable. When we're put our policy hats on, or even in some cases our design hats, we want those rules of thumb. We want those measurable kind of statistics or quantifiable attributes, data. And we make decisions based on it, and we're kind of beholden to it in many cases. One of the examples of that is density. A lot of us in this industry, deal in the units per acre, and that becomes this kind of abstract methodology for describing appropriateness for a place.
Right.
However, when we think about pocket neighborhoods and we think about scales of sociability and just this type of development generally, it's more about the unmeasurable and a different set of criteria than just sticking to 8 units per acre or 12 units to the acre. Walk me through, in your experience, when you've been working with communities who maybe have a starting point being concerned about density, because that's what our industry has told them to measure success or failure upon, and transitioning to a world of talking about maybe some of those unmeasurable attributes of a place that we should be judging a place on.
This one could be expanded out, but it's a really good one. When we talk about measurable and unmeasurable, we're living in a world of definition, in a world of bottom lines, in a world of efficiency, and a world of we want to make things accessible for people. Well, to do that, we've got to make them as cheap as possible. And we live in a world where profit, if you can make a living, make a profit on it, then you can keep going. And these are things that are measured by data points, measured by numbers, measured by bottom lines. They are the value of things. You take a look at the valuation of a project and how many dollars per square foot, how many units per acre, how many, what's the return on investment. These are important things. Those are things about the value of a project. But you shift between value and values, and you enter a different realm. Values are about a sense of self, a sense of security, a sense of belonging, a sense of relationship, a sense of community, a sense of being in a place where I may be vulnerable, but this place helps me feel more safe so that I can then offer my gifts to the world. These are not measurable as easily. They are, but not as easily. And so I think we need to take a look at the values that we're creating. And when we come down to when it's being built, yes, it costs so much per square foot. But what really matters is how it lives. I have something I call the livability quotient. Okay, if you're going to make things in terms of value, what's the livability per square foot? Most of what we build out there has a very low livability quotient. The realtors may say it's got so many square feet. Well, do they talk about how many livable square feet there are? Do you have a dining room and a living room that are used 5 times a year? Whereas the highly livable space, the livability quotient of a kitchen eating area, family room might have a high livability quotient. A hallway has a very low livability quotient if it's only about getting from here to there. Widen the hallway a little bit, create a bookcase, create a place for family pictures, widen it a little bit more. Maybe there's a desk that's your overflow workspace or home workspace. Maybe widen it a little bit, put a window in it, and that's the place for plants and growing things. Maybe you widen it a little bit more and it becomes a little alcove off the hallway. Maybe it's got a seat in it, it becomes overflow sleeping. Maybe pull out drawers down below and you've got the bedding. So that's places that a hallway increases its livability quotient. And when I take a look at a building site, I look at it and I sometimes will do a diagnosis map from red to green, from unusable, how the heck are we going to fix this, to, gosh, this needs a lot of work, I'm not sure what, but it's got potential, to, you know, we could do some tweaking here and this could work, to, hey, this really works well, it's beautiful. So that's green, yellow, orange, red. And I may come up with a plan, or I might be critiquing a plan, and I will do a quick review in my mind and I'll begin to do a diagnosis heat map. Where is it working? Where is it not working? Where is the improvement could be? And that tells me about how to increase the livability of the place, whether at the scale of a cluster of homes, or at the scale of a block, or at the scale of a house or a room. And by taking that, I think we can begin to identify where we as designers need to pay attention and have that come and really lift its weight.
So one of the other things that is falling victim to numerical analysis and kind of leaving it there is affordable housing. And so on one side, we've got a camp that says we need to deliver X number of units of affordable housing by, in 5 years to meet goals. And that kind of is like the end of the conversation. And there's a certain financing structure and a building typology and project delivery method that creates kind of a one-size-fits-all delivery of said unit. And certain segments of the industry understand it and know how to do it. But then you've got communities who know what that looks like and what it represents and how it doesn't fit their values or even the context of their neighborhood. And I think one of the things, one of the powers, the superpowers of pocket neighborhoods is, yes, there are units, but you're more focused on how do you deliver homes. Mm-hmm. That livability quotient certainly is part of that. But walk us through how, in your work, in your experience, pocket neighborhoods, affordability, both at the outset when the project is built, but then things you're thinking about, how building in permanent affordability or attainability is kind of baked into the pocket neighborhood.
That's a good one. I think there are several related issues here, but I want to start with by just the language that we use. When we talk about units and housing units and affordability, we're immediately drawing forward the numbers, the equation, the buildability, the efficiency of that. We're not talking about home, about agency, about empowerment, about the place for a household where you come and you can rest. These are things that I think are really important. And when we shift from affordable housing to reachable homes, homes within reach for everyone, whether it's a lower income, middle income, these are homes within reach rather than affordable housing units. Just the shift begins to open up the mind to the human side of the equation, the human side of life and living. So pocket neighborhoods work with bringing together, the development realities of numbers and build, how do you construct this and make it work. You can't just build it and lose money. It's got to be able to pay for itself somehow. But to do so in such a way that you create the beginnings of a community that can grow and deepen, where people can find their lives together and grow together, grow memories together. They've got a place for, they are with one another, and they grow relationships. They can come out, and chats can become framework for care, you know, as people move along. And care then begins to develop into a sense of belonging and meaning. And that's the values part of the equation.
Yeah, it seems like when you combine the gentle density that is inherent to pocket neighborhoods and with this sensibility around wholeness and about home and about reachability and about mixing of everything, where a complete neighborhood has, you know, every income level and people at every stage of life kind of interacting, bumping into each other, helping each other get along. That to me is some of the real key superpowers of pocket neighborhoods. Well, Ross, this has been excellent. I think many viewers are going to be asking where they, you know, we've introduced a lot of concepts, we've talked about a lot of things, we've kind of caught our breath after a trip together,
right,
which was extraordinary. You know, one of the things we want to tell viewers about is that prior to us sitting down and having this chat, we had a longer discussion with an audience here in our office. Folks can go and check that out and watch that along with the visual content that Ross shared with our group. But do you want to talk about what you've created as a kind of living resource? Right. You've got the book and you've got an amazing website that people can learn from, but also be inspired by and also reach out to you.
Yeah. Well, after years of doing this and studying this, I was asked to write a book. It took me 4 years of research, of travel, of talking with people, and I began to understand what we had done. And I began to understand this whole concept, and I put it together in the form of a book called Pocket Neighborhoods, Creating Small-Scale Community in a Large-Scale World. And that's been out. It continues to sell well after 12 years now, I think it is, maybe more, 13 years. And that's available at your local bookstore, online, and that has a lot of resources, a lot of stories. Combined with that, we put a website together, pocket-neighborhoods.net, and a lot of the key essential patterns are there, some of the stories are there, other resources to people can drop down into a deeper study, that's there. My own website has examples, rosschapin.com. So people can look at that.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming by today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great week and safe trip home.
Good.